I am not exaggerating. Within minutes, I get a call from this attorney. You'll never guess what happened. I said, the computer's fixed. She said, how did you know? It just suddenly started working. And I told her the story. It was that strong, that intense. So this Kida, these people's hurt feelings, their feelings were truly hurt. The reality was they were suffering. I had done nothing wrong. The school had done nothing wrong. The production had done nothing wrong. But the point was they were hurt, and that hurt had a fallout. Now, Hashem, in this happy ending story, I understood, I resolved the hurt, they accepted, but that's called a kapeda. There's many stories of people that suffer from kapedas. So that's why I go back to what I said to Malki, that if at all possible, you want to gain forgiveness, even if you did nothing wrong. Now, if you're saying, but I can't gain forgiveness because this person's not rational, then my advice to you would be to spiritually do things to protect yourself from that energy. If you cannot remove the negative energy, you want to create protections. This Shabbos is Shabbos Mevarchim, which means next week is Elul. And of course, Elul means starting getting ready for the high holidays. And from last week, Wednesday, from the 15th of Av, from Chamisha Asar B'Av, it's already the Jewish custom to wish another person a ksiva v'chasima taiva, to be written and inscribed for a good, sweet year. Usually, we're told we're supposed to think about a holiday 30 days before. But for Rosh Hashanah, we're thinking about it 45 days before. Maybe the significance of Rosh Hashanah. We have an entire 29 days of Elul to really think about it. And of course, connecting to the energy of the 15th of Av and that love and union between the Jews, which naturally flows into hoping everyone has a wonderful upcoming year. So with all of that, I thought it would be nice to start today focusing on this idea of the love that we should have for each other as a really good intro to the work of Elul and then the work of the high holidays. I entitled this Baseless Love. The Beis Hamikdash, the second temple specifically, was destroyed for sinas chinam, for baseless hatred. And we're told it will be rebuilt with baseless love, with ahavat chinam. Now, Lubavitcher Rebbe said we have finally, after 1900 years of work, rectified the sinas chinam that destroyed the temple, but we still should focus on ahavas chinam, on baseless love, to live like Mashiach, because of course that is how we will be living by the redemption, with this love that doesn't need a reason. So to unpack this a little, I wanted to bring in some ideas from a Hasidic discourse of the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, known as the Rebbe Rashab, who has a long discourse on baseless hatred, baseless love, entitled Hechaltza. I want to give a little bit of background on the story in the Torah that this discourse is coming from. Parshas Balak, when Moav hires Bilam to come and curse the Jews, and of course God didn't let, but he says to Moab and to Midian, which were the two nations that together were thinking we got to get rid of these Jewish people, he said, listen, you know, their God isn't letting me curse them, but I've got a better idea for you. Get them to sin, and their God will take care of them. And they set up this whole scheme to bring the Jews to idolatry and adultery. And as Bilam correctly plotted, the tremendous plague came and killed many people, primarily from the tribe of Shimon. It seems like all the sinners were in the tribe of Shimon. And then, with tremendous self-sacrifice, manages in the act of intercourse between the prince of Shimon and a princess of Midian to kill the two of them, which is halachically, according to Jewish law, the only way you could kill them at that moment, literally in the act of intercourse, which is an insane miracle, and the plague stops. And after all that, we have Hashem saying to Moshe, now you have to go and destroy Midian. This is the nation that tried to destroy the Jewish people. Because of them, 24,000 Jews from the tribe of Shimon died because they fell in these sins. So this Sidon, this nation who joined up with Moab to attack the Jews, to destroy the Jews, to bring them to sin, officially because they were scared of the Jews attacking them, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe explains that Midian is the root of evil. Midian is from the root word madon, which means arguments, argumentation, conflict, baseless hatred, evil. Why does argument and conflict and hatred equal evil? Because godliness is unity. Godliness is opposite. And the opposite of that is evil. The primary difference between godliness and evil is there achdus, is there unity, or is there the lack of achdus, separation, division? Godliness, evil, unity, separation. And we see this classically in the encounter between Yaakov and Esav when they're talking about their respective realities. And Yaakov says, Yesh li kol, I have all this union. Well, Esav says, Yesh li rav, I have a lot, meaning what he had was a lot. There was multiplicity in it. And similarly, in this encounter, we're speaking of Esav's people, and Esav had in his family unit then, because when he came to Yaakov, all his 400 men had already disappeared. So he's coming with his family unit, 6 people. And it says nefashos in the plural. When we speak later about Yaakov's family unit, which we know when they went down to Egypt, we were 70, all achdus, unity. Esav actually rav, a lot, many. Yaakov, 70 nefesh in the singular. Esav, 6 nefashos in the plural. So that's the Yaakov versus the Esav, the godly versus the evil, the unified versus the... And holistically, this goes back to, as God planned out creation, the spiritual creation, deliberate design by God, that before our worlds, according to the basic structure as we understand in Kabbalah, there are 4 spiritual worlds from which then emerges our world. Our world doesn't mean planet Earth. It means all the physical reality, what we call the entire Milky Way galaxy. That's all our world, the physical world. Beyond our world are 4 spiritual worlds. Each spiritual world subdivides into many other worlds. But in broad terms, we have 4 spiritual worlds. Beyond those 4 spiritual worlds, I would say prior, remembering there's no time, but we use words like prior to make sense to our brain. So prior to the 4 spiritual worlds is a reality called tohu. Tohu means chaos, confusion. If you look into the very beginning of the Chumash, in Bereshis, the first pasuk is Bereshis bara Elokim hashamayim v'haaretz. For the sake of 2 firsts, the Jewish people in Torah, God created heaven and earth. The second pasuk is v'haaretz haysa tohu v'vohu v'chosheach al pnei atom, and it was tohu v'vohu, chaos, confusion, darkness. So what's referred to in verse 2, chapter 1, Bereshis, and it was tohu v'vohu, this confusion, this chaos, this darkness, is talking about, according to Kabbalah, the spiritual reality that we call the world of Tohu. The world of Tohu is the first spiritual reality that has a commonality to the worlds that followed, which the worlds that followed, our solar system of 4 spiritual worlds and us as a physical world, are called the worlds of tikkufication. In a Kabbalistic, spiritual, mystical concept of tikkun, of releasing the sparks of godliness that fell to this world through what happened in the world of Tohu. The only thing physical is here, planet Earth, Milky Way, galaxy. When I'm saying worlds and worlds and worlds, there's nothing physical going on. These are all spiritual realities. It was the first spiritual reality that had 10 manifestation of God's energies, meaning there are many realities higher than Tohu, but none of them are concrete enough to be considered a world. They're too spiritual for that. So we have God's initial primordial constriction of self, and then we have all the godliness which emerges and which gets a little lower and a little lower and a little lower, but it's still very, very intense godliness. It's too intense godliness to be anything as substantial as a world. And then after myriads and myriads of we come to the first quasi-world. Now, in that first reality of a world, 1,000,000 miles after God's original constriction of self for Earth to ultimately emerge, for a Jew to be on planet Earth and serve God, we have the first world, but it's like all 10 expressions of God are constricted in one, because it wasn't really small enough to be developed enough to have 10. The next reality after that is the reality of Tohu, which for the first time, we have 10 expressions of God, what Kabbalah calls the 10 spheros, which are 10 manifestations of God's energy. Now, those same 10 manifestations exist on all the 4 spiritual worlds in our solar system of Tikkun, and actually are mirrored in our soul as well. But by Tohu, these 10 powers, unlike by our soul, unlike by the worlds of Tikkun, these 10 powers could not blend. If you're wondering why I'm giving you this 101 course in Kabbalah, it's to get to this point. They couldn't blend. They couldn't meld in very simple terms like we would talk. They couldn't work together. So we had chesed, loving kindness, beneficence of the world of Tohu, and we have withholding of the world of Tohu. And the two couldn't blend. You give, you were strict. Giving, holding back, no commonality here. None of the 10 could blend. None of the 10 had commonality, which calls hiskalus. So you have these very intense powers, and they couldn't blend. God planned it with his flaw. This wasn't a mess up in the system. This is the system, that we have very powerful lights in very thin vessels. Vessels and lights are both godliness. Vessels are more constricted lights, and lights are more revealed lights. But the lights were very powerful, like very thin crystal holding a very hot liquid. So very intense lights in very thin vessels, and they're not blending, so they're not getting strength from each other to support the load. So deliberate design, the vessel shattered. The gas in those vessels, and the shards of those vessels fell, falling through the 4 worlds of rectification of tikkun, and the heaviest pieces falling to our reality. The tikkun is releasing those shards, which we do by using the physicality of this world to serve God. We release the sparks embedded, sparks from the shards of the world of Tohu. So that's why this whole system called tikkun, rectification, is to release and allows those shards to ascend upward. Why am I bringing this in? Because we see built into the system that when things can't handle each other, can't stand each other, it doesn't work, it shatters. So the initial source of the separation and divisiveness of evil as embodied in this nation Midian is in what Kabbalistically is called Shviras HaKelim, the shattering of these vessels, the spiritual shattering of these spiritual vessels, where the spiritual shards, very, very heavy, intense godly energy, fall all the way down. Ultimately, some get refined along the way in the 4 spiritual worlds, but the heaviest ones all fall into our reality to be released by us as we use the physical to serve God. So this was the energy of Midian. Midian in this shattered vessels, embodying this separation. We could compare it to the 7 nations of Israel that the Jews went and conquered. All those 7 nations were absolute evil, and each nation embodied a bad trait. But Midian is the more found energy of evil, the separation, the argumentation, the divisiveness of evil. All of this I said so you should understand the deep evil, the enormous power when there's lack of love, when there's a spaceless hatred. There's different things we focus on and work on. But when we understand its Kabbalistic roots, we understand this is a detail. No, this is huge. This is the roots of evil. The temple was destroyed for baseless hatred. It'll be rebuilt with baseless love. What is baseless hatred?
Anti-Semitism.
Well, no, here I'm speaking among Jews.
Oh, among ourselves?
I would accept, and that's the definition of baseless hatred, which we could experience directed toward us as anti-Semitism, and we could experience from Jews and to Jews. But what would be the definition? There's no
reason for it.
Exactly. We're told the temple was destroyed for sinas hinam, which we translate as baseless hatred. Sina means hatred, and chinam means for free. Not meaning they didn't charge us for the hating us, but sinat chinam, that there's no reason for the hatred. Yael said correctly. That's what baseless hatred means, and that is anti-Semitism. Of course, there's a reason for the hatred, just like there's a reason for baseless hatred, but it's not the reason they're saying. Just like if we experience hatred among Jews, it's also not the reasons we give. Baseless hatred without reason means it's not about the details. It's not that this person gave me this problem, this person messed me over in this way, this person opposed me in a certain area. All of those things could make you have very negative feelings toward another person. But that's not called sinat chinam. That's not called baseless hatred. There's a reason hatred. It's not appropriate. It's not allowed. It's not kosher. Don't have it. But that's not what the sages mean when they say baseless hatred. If a person's opposing you and you're fighting with someone over a specific issue, you're angry with someone over a specific issue, that's not baseless. Baseless hatred, which is spiritual energy of Midian, is that you can't stand the person, even if you know nothing about them. You can't deal with them yet. You can't have unity with them. This is sinas chinam. This hate is not. This hate is for no reason because we want to live with ourselves and we like to feel good about ourselves. We have this emotion of sinas chinam, of baseless hatred. We make up reasons and justifications, but the reasons and justifications are false. They come after the sinas chinam, which is why I think what about anti-Semitism is actually a great example, because that's exactly happening there. People have a hatred of the Jewish people, linked, really, Jewish people, God, whichever one comes first, hatred of God, hatred of the Jews, hatred of Jews, hatred of God. And then after they hate us, they make up reasons why they hate us, right? And that's why when you look historically, the reasons given are always what has to do with that culture and that society. So they hate us because we're rich, if this is the culture that hates the rich, or they hate us because we're poor, if there's a culture that hates the poor. They hate us because we're communists, or they hate us because we're socialists, or they hate us because we're Democrats. They hate us because we're the colonizers. They hate us because we're the natives. First, we hate you. Then, based on the current trends, we decide why we hate you. That is sinas chinam. And the sages were saying that the temple was destroyed for sinas chinam. It means the Jews were having sinas chinam among each other. First, we hate, and then, like we experience with anti-Semitism, then we have to flesh it out and give reasons why. That's sinas chinam. It's very powerful, profound, that the first temple was destroyed for the three big crimes of idolatry, adultery, and murder. And the Jews were in exile for 70 years. And through the 70-year exile, we refined that evil and we got back to Israel. The second temple was destroyed for baseless hatred. And we've been in exile over 1900 years, which means for 1900 years, we didn't refine that evil. One, because it's so big, and two, because we never left this crime. We kept falling back into the sin, so we couldn't refine the evil. The Lubavitch Rebbe did say we finished. In 1991, the Rebbe said, now we don't have to have baseless love to repair the baseless hatred. That we accomplished after 1900 plus years. Now we're having baseless love to live redemption. But 1900 years versus 70, idolatry, adultery, murder, 70 years, baseless hatred over 1900. It shows a lot about the power of it. Yeah.
In terms of like today's life with baseless hatred, I could very strongly dislike someone or hate someone, let's say another Jew. But what's the difference between that? Or is there a difference between that and between acting on it? I might really strongly dislike, hate someone, but I'm not going to go slash their tires and egg their house and spread lashon hara about them. So is there a difference? Because we're going to come across people we don't like very strongly.
There's a difference, but it doesn't whitewash the problem. If you look at the Ten Commandments, lo sachmod, don't have this feeling of desiring what someone else has. Now, in a certain level, to get punished for it, you have to on the feeling. But the prohibition of lo sachmod is not coveting, not having that desire. But we're not going to punish you until you actually do something about it. But the prohibition is desiring someone else's whatever, wife, property, home, fields. So yes, of course, technically, one has to on the hatred for it to be a crime in that legalistic sense. But the essence fact of having the hatred, that's the problem. So Yael is saying that if she has a negative feeling, but she never acts on it, is it really bad because she never acts on it? So I would say it's commendable that we never act on a negative feeling. What would our actions be? Yael said, gossip. She's right. Talking bad about someone, looking at someone with a bad eye, muttering about them, murmuring about them. She's right. That's how we would act it out. Most of us wouldn't go and slash anyone's tires. But the power of speech, we perhaps fall into that. So it's very commendable that if you have that feeling, you don't allow anything to be expressed like gossip, but it doesn't whitewash the negative feeling. Because really, we're not supposed to have those feelings. We're really supposed to work on ourselves to have positive feelings for every Jew.
Or if it's legit, it's not baseless. Like someone did something very nasty to you that was very hurtful, that had consequences on your family, let's say. So you don't like that person, you despise that person, you have nothing to do with them, but
you're not doing anything about it because you're
not doing anything about it. But it's legit to have those resentful feelings towards them.
The word legit is it's understandable.
It's understandable.
It's never legit by God, but it's understandable. I think the best technique that I know of, and maybe later we'll discuss others, because it's a very practical question, and I'm sure Yael's not the only one. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya discusses the power of compassion. And the Alter Rebbe says that compassion minimizes hatred and releases love. And it really works. I've tried it and I've advised other people in these situations and they've tried it. So thinking about that person, you really try, and the more you know about them, the more it's easy to come up with excuses, to have compassion for why would another human being act that way? A Jew. Why would a Jew treat another Jew the way this person treated me or my children or my husband or my mother or my sister? Why would someone do that? And the answer we generally come up with in broad strokes is they must be really hurting to hurt someone like that. They must be in a lot of pain to want to inflict pain. They must have suffered a lot to create suffering, or case specific to whatever the situation is. And the more you think that you're deliberately trying to create a compassion for the person, they have to live with themselves all day long with all that negative energy stewing inside of them. I just had this interaction with them that was quite unpleasant, but they live with themselves and all that negativity all day long. And the more you feel compassion, the Alter Rebbe says, you can't hate someone you have compassion for. And you really can't. The more you have compassion, the more you feel bad for them. You can have rachmanis for them, compassion. You don't have hatred. It's like nebuch. So you might not come to love, which of course is what the Alter Rebbe would like you to come to, but it definitely diffuse the hatred. Just like if you were really upset at someone, like someone's not behaving nicely to you. I'm not saying hatred. I'm saying a different situation, like one of your kids or someone like that. And then they say to you, I'm having a really hard day. I'm going through a lot of negative emotions. I'm feeling very stressed. I'm very overwhelmed. When they start saying that, it diffuses your negative feelings. Instead of being upset at them, you feel bad. That's what they're going through. And that's why they're acting out this way. So similarly, if you do it to yourself and you really have compassion for this person and think of all the justifications you can why they're in a bad space, it lessens and lessens and should ultimately completely take away your negative feelings. And that's, as I know, it the best technique. But the fact that you have these negative feelings and aren't talking about it is very special. And then the next level is to take away the feelings. Any other questions?
Yes. So what about if you have another Jew who's upset with you? Let's say you didn't do anything, or you did do something you asked from Mechila, but let's say from a rational perspective or a healthy place, there's no reason why they should be upset. They themselves are unhealthy, and because of their lack of health, they're upset at you or another Jew. So is that harm still in effect?
I understand your question completely, and I'm sure we've all unfortunately might have been in this type of situation. If someone's a Jew, Jews have a lot of power. Every Jew is considered God's only child. So Jews are very, very powerful, even if they're unaware of it. So if a Jew is upset with a person, not because the person did anything wrong, but because this person is not healthy and totally misconstrued a situation, and the person that's being accused falsely tried to explain, apologize, but the other person is not rational and therefore very upset with them, legally, you're not in a flaw, but the other person's hurt could still hurt you because, again, it's the power of the Jew. That's what we call a kipeda, when a Jew's hurt feelings are causing a problem to another Jew, a kipeda, which translates as a grudge. I've seen this personally, and I know many people that have suffered from kipedas, and it not linked necessarily that you did something wrong. I had a very dramatic story. It was the first time my school was doing a video production. We produced a film, and the production was supposed to be Saturday night, and this was Thursday morning. And I get a call from the girl who is doing the whole thing. This is the first time ever. It's all on her computer. And she's, Mrs. Turen, I don't have to tell you this, but my computer completely crashed. And I've been in the Apple store for hours. And they say there's no way to fix it and there's no way to retrieve anything. And everything of our film is all on this computer. I'm really sorry. I know it's Thursday. I don't know what's up. And I was, what time did your computer crash? And she said, oh, last night at, I don't remember, let's say 10 o'clock. I said, okay, I know what happened. I'm going to deal with it. Why did I know what happened? Because I had that morning come to work and I saw an email I received the night before, sent the same time her computer crashed, from parents of a student in my school. And the parents were telling me in this email that the school's production was all against their family. They weren't blaming me. They thought I was innocently duped by some malicious, I don't know who out there, that had plotted this entire script to harm them and to make fun of them and to hurt them. They sent me this email at the same time the computer crashed. I see in the morning, I come to work, I read the email, and then I get this call. And I knew, okay, this is exactly what's going on. It took a few hours till I reached them. I'll make the story short, but I completely apologized, said I made up the story myself. Nobody fed it to me. I spoke to the woman. I couldn't get through the husband who was at work, but I spoke and spoke and spoke. And she forgave me. And she reached her husband. She explained the whole story to her husband, and her husband forgave. It was a complete misunderstanding. I am not exaggerating. Within minutes, I get a call from this attorney. You'll never guess what happened. I said, the computer's fixed. She said, how did you know? It just suddenly started working. And I told her the story. It was that strong, that intense. So this Kida, these people's hurt feelings, their feelings were truly hurt. The reality was they were suffering. I had done nothing wrong. The school had done nothing wrong. The production had done nothing wrong. But the point was they were hurt, and that hurt had a fallout. Now, Hashem, in this happy ending story, I understood. I resolved the hurt. They accepted, but that's called a kapeda. There's many stories of people that suffer from kapedas. So that's why I go back to what I said to Malki, that if at all possible, you want to gain forgiveness, even if you did nothing wrong. Now, if you're saying, but I can't gain forgiveness because this person's not rational, then my advice to you would be to spiritually do things to protect yourself from that energy. If you cannot remove the negative energy, you want to create protections. If it's extra tzedakah, extra charity, extra, you're telling God, I am saying this to him. I am giving this charity as a protection against that energy, because I know the energy is there and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm asking for protection from that energy, for me, for my family, for whoever the energy be directed against.
So then it sounds like, in terms of how you're linking it, that this kapeda is where many people refer to an Ein Hara, that it's that energy, that's the origin.
Well, an Ein Hara is different than a kapeda, because an Ein Hara generally implies someone is setting an evil eye on you, to use that term. A kapeda is not that the person has to be consciously thinking they want you hurt. A kapeda means a person is hurt, and they have this pain and negative energy from being hurt. And because you're linked, at least in their head, to the hurt, you're the target of this negative energy. It does not mean that consciously the other person is wanting to hurt you. That's a big difference. And Ein Hara would mean there is some sense of the other person trying to set this evil eye energy on you. In a kapeda, the other person could be clueless. They're just suffering. If a person has something good going on in their life and someone else doesn't have that good, your good could trigger their bad feelings. They're not wishing you harm at all. They're happy for you. They have no intention of harming you, but it could still be that your good is triggering their pain. And therefore there could still be a kapeda, even though they would say, no, I never meant to harm you. I have no bad feelings for you at all. That's why I wouldn't make them synonymous. It just means another Jew is hurting and you are the source of their hurt.
I've witnessed kapeda, not with myself, between two friends amongst each other, that a couple times there have been situations they didn't mean to harm someone, but then they made a threat to the other that was a not good energy, saying these really chas v'shalom things that should never, ever be said to someone. I don't even want to say it.
It's a big problem. When someone hurts us, we'd like to try to forgive them. If someone seriously hurt you, like Yael is saying, we still would try to forgive them, and we don't want to be the source of another suffering.
The question is, at that point, though, if it gets to a point of that level of threat and you do everything to try to fix, but then they just are wanting to keep wishing the worst for the person, then what can you do at that point?
That's what I said to Eliza. You turn to Hashem and try to create protection for the negative energy.